The alarm screamed through the small escape pod like a wounded animal. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, turning everything inside blood red for a split second. Then dark, then red again. Liana's orange-scaled hands gripped the controls. So tight her claws left marks in the metal. "Come on, come on!" She shouted at the machine, but it wasn't listening. Her escape pod was falling through the sky of planet Zartek like a burning rock. The heat shields outside her window glowed bright orange, so hot they looked like they might melt any second. Through all the noise and flashing lights, she could see the ground getting closer and closer. This was not how she'd planned to spend her day. Liana belonged to a race called Draconians. They were tough, strong people who looked like dragons walking on two legs. Her bright orange scales covered her whole body, and she had small horn-like ridges on her head that made her look fierce. Most other aliens in the galaxy thought Draconians were scary monsters, but Liana wasn't a monster. She was just trying to survive. The pod shook so hard her teeth rattled. She pressed more buttons, pulled more switches, but nothing worked right. The computer that was supposed to help her land safely was completely broken. The wings that were supposed to slow her down were damaged too. "I'm going to crash," she said, out loud, and hearing the words made it feel real. Through the window, she could see Zartek spreading out below her. There were rolling hills covered in strange purple plants, and way off in the distance, she could see the shiny towers of what looked like a town or city. That's where she needed to go, if she lived through this crash. Liana had been through dangerous situations before. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for being tough survivors. They were also known for being fierce warriors who scared other aliens just by looking at them. But being tough didn't make the idea of crashing into an alien planet any less frightening. She pulled back on the controls with all her strength, her muscles straining. The pod responded just a little bit, changing its angle slightly. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't die when she hit the ground. The ground rushed up toward her faster than she could think. She closed her eyes tight, held her breath, and said a quick prayer to the old draconian gods. She hadn't believed in them since she was a kid, but right now seemed like a good time to start again. The impact was terrible. Metal screamed and groaned as the pod hit the ground and dug a deep trench in the alien soil. It bounced once, twice, then slid to a stop at the edge of a forest of those strange purple trees. For a moment, everything was quiet. Liana hung in her safety straps, feeling dizzy and confused. She was alive, which was more than she'd expected. Her head hurt, and she could feel something wet on her face. When she touched it, her fingers came away with copper-colored blood. "Computer, give me a status report," she said, her voice rough and dry. The ship's computer tried to answer, but mostly just made crackling static sounds. Finally, it managed to say, "Life support systems ... critical. Communications ... offline. Navigation ... damage." "Great," Liana muttered. "Just perfect." She unbuckled herself from the straps and immediately felt a sharp pain in her ribs. She pressed her hand to her side and winced. Probably bruised, but not broken. She'd gotten lucky moving carefully. She gathered up whatever supplies she could find that weren't broken. There was a medical kit, a water purifier, some emergency food, and her personal weapon, a small but powerful sidearm that she hoped she wouldn't need to use. The computer told her the air outside was safe to breathe, which was good news. At least she wouldn't suffocate. The door of the pod hissed and groaned as it opened. Liana stepped out onto the soil of Zartek, taking her first breath of alien air. It was thinner than she was used to and had a strange metallic taste. But she could breathe it okay. The gravity was a bit lighter than normal too, which made her feel almost like she was floating dot in the distance. She could still see that settlement she'd spotted while falling. It wasn't very big, probably just a frontier outpost or mining colony, but it was her best chance of finding help and a way to contact her people. She put her supplies in a pack and started walking. The walk took longer than she'd expected. By the time she reached the edge of the settlement, the twin suns of Zartek were setting, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. The buildings were a mix of temporary structures and more permanent ones, which told her the colony was well established, but still growing. She looked around for the first building that seemed like a public place, somewhere she could ask for help. She found a squat, rectangular building with flickering lights and a sign that showed the universal symbols for food and drink. It was clearly some kind of tavern or restaurant. Liana took a deep breath and prepared herself for what was about to happen. She knew exactly what would occur when she walked through that door. It was always the same. Fear, disgust, sometimes outright hostility. People would see her orange scales, her clawed hands, her horn-like ridges, and they would be afraid. But she needed help, so she had to try. The door slid open automatically as she approached, and she stepped into the warmth and noise of the tavern. The place was full of people, humans, a few other alien species she recognized, all talking and laughing and drinking. Until they saw her. The conversation stopped immediately. Every single person turned to look at her. She saw their eyes widen, with fear and surprise. She saw some of them instinctively reach for weapons. She saw others actually back away from her. "I don't mean any harm," she said quickly, raising her empty hands so everyone could see she wasn't carrying a weapon. "My escape pod crashed. I just need shelter and a way to contact my people." The silence in the room was uncomfortable and seemed to last forever. Then someone from the back of the room shouted, "We don't serve your kind here, lizard. Why don't you try the wilderness? I hear it's nice this time of year." Cruel laughter rippled through the crowd. Liana felt her scales flush with embarrassment and anger, but she kept her composure. This wasn't the first time she'd faced such prejudice, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. "I can pay," she said, pulling out a universal credit chip from her pocket. The kind of money that worked anywhere in the galaxy. "Don't want your money," the bartender growled. He was a big, burly alien with 4 arms and a mean expression. "Just want you gone before you scare off my customers." Liana was about to respond when she heard the door open behind her. Cool evening air rushed in, and she turned to see a tall, muscular human male standing in the doorway. He had blonde hair that caught the light from inside the tavern, and he wore a sleek, grey protective suit that showed off his powerful build. His blue eyes looked around the room, taking in the situation with calm intelligence. "What's going on here?" he asked. His voice was deep and carried easily across the now silent room. "Nothing that concerns you, human," the bartender said, though he spoke to the human with much less hostility than he'd shown Liana. "Just taking out the trash." The human's gaze shifted to Liana, taking in her battered appearance, the dried blood on her face and the small pack of supplies in her clawed hands. Something flickered in his eyes, not fear or disgust, but curiosity and what looked like concern. "Looks to me like someone who needs help," he said simply. Then he stepped forward and held out his hand to Liana. "My name's Alex. What's yours?" Liana stared at his outstretched hand for a moment, hardly believing what she was seeing. No non-draconian had ever offered to shake her hand before. Most were too afraid to get that close. "Liana," she said finally, taking his hand. His skin felt warm against her scales, softer than she'd expected, but with a firm, confident grip. The tavern remained completely silent as Alex led her outside. The door slid shut behind them with a soft hiss, cutting off the stares and whispers. From inside, the night air of Zartek had grown chilly, and Liana had to suppress a shiver. Draconians were naturally warm-blooded, but the crash and all the stress afterward had drained her energy. "Don't pay attention to them," Alex said, nodding. Back toward the tavern. "Frontier settlements like this one tend to be suspicious of newcomers, especially ... Especially terrifying lizard monsters," Liana finished, with a bitter edge to her voice. Alex laughed, and the sound was unexpectedly pleasant in the quiet night. "I was going to say, especially those who look different. But your version certainly has more dramatic flair." Despite herself, Liana felt her mouth twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Where I come from, being dramatic is practically a cultural requirement." "I'd love to hear more about that," Alex said, his blue eyes catching the light from the settlement's street lamps. "My living pod isn't far from here. It's not much, but it's warm, and I've got medical supplies for that cut on your forehead." Liana touched the dried blood above her eye. "I've had worse." "I don't doubt it," Alex replied, his gaze appraising her with what seemed like genuine admiration rather than fear. "But infection is infection, even for a tough draconian." She blinked in surprise. "You know my species?" "I've traveled extensively," he explained, as they began walking down the dusty main street. "Humans are relatively new to interstellar society, so we tend to study up on the races we might encounter. Your people have quite the reputation." "Not all of it good, I imagine," Liana muttered. "Most species have complicated histories," Alex said diplomatically. "Humans certainly do." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, passing the scattered buildings of the settlement. Liana noticed how other residents gave them a wide berth, some openly staring at the strange pair they made, the orange-scaled draconian and the tall human male walking side by side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Alex's living pod was situated at the settlement's edge, offering a stunning view of the purple-tinged mountains in the distance and the gleaming towers of a larger city beyond. The structure itself was indeed small, a compact, dome-shaped dwelling that reminded Liana of the emergency shelters used in draconian military outposts. "Home sweet home," Alex said, pressing his palm to the entry panel. The door slid open, revealing an interior that was surprisingly cozy despite its limited space. The pod was essentially one room, but it had been designed very efficiently to serve multiple functions. A small kitchen occupied one corner, a work desk another. A sitting area with two comfortable-looking chairs faced a large panoramic window that dominated one wall, offering that breathtaking view of the alien landscape. And against the far wall was a single bed, not a small single bed, but a double bed, neatly made with dark blue covers. "It's compact," Liana observed, stepping inside and looking around. "Efficient," Alex corrected with a smile. "Please sit down. I'll get something for that cut." Liana perched somewhat awkwardly on one of the chairs while Alex rummaged through a cabinet. The entire pod was immaculately clean and organized, she noticed. Not what she'd expected from a human male living alone. "So," Alex said, returning with a small medical kit, "what brings a draconian to this backwater planet? We don't get many visitors from the Draconian Empire here." "Not by choice," Liana said, wincing as he gently cleaned the cut on her forehead. His touch was surprisingly delicate for someone with such strong-looking hands. "I was on a diplomatic transport when we were attacked by raiders. The captain ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate while they engaged the enemy. My pod's navigation system malfunctioned, and ... well, here I am." "Lucky for me," Alex said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her scales flush warm. "You're really not afraid of how I look?" she asked quietly, suddenly self-conscious about her alien features. She had to resist the urge to cover her face with her clawed hands. Alex's expression softened as he applied a healing gel to her cut. On the contrary, I think you're very beautiful. The sincerity in his voice took her breath away. No non-draconian had ever called her beautiful before. Terrifying, intimidating, fearsome. These were the words outsiders used to describe her kind. You're either very brave or very foolish, she murmured. But there was no bite to her words. Maybe a bit of both, he admitted with a grin that made something flutter in her chest. Are you hungry? I can offer you a genuine human meal. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than those emergency rations you're carrying. As Alex prepared a simple meal, they exchanged stories. Liana told him about growing up in the Draconian Empire, about their warrior traditions and complex honor codes. In turn, Alex shared tales of Earth and humanity's rapid expansion into space after discovering faster-than-light travel. Humans adapted remarkably quickly to interstellar society, Liana observed, sampling the savory stew Alex had prepared. It was surprisingly delicious. Most species take generations to adjust. We're stubborn that way, Alex said, refilling her bowl without asking. When we want something, we go after it with everything we've got. The intensity of his gaze as he said this made Liana wonder if he was still talking about space exploration. The thought sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. As the night deepened, their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of surprising connection. Liana found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around non-draconians. There was something about Alex, his openness, his genuine interest in her culture, his complete lack of fear, that disarmed her usual defenses. It wasn't until she found herself stifling a yawn that Liana realized how late it had grown. The realization brought with it another awareness. There was only one bed in the small pod. Alex followed her gaze and cleared his throat. I can take the floor, he offered, though the hard metal surface looked far from comfortable. Don't be ridiculous, Liana said, her heart racing despite her casual tone. The bed is large enough for both of us. Unless you're uncomfortable sharing with a draconian. Not at all, Alex replied, his voice dropping to a lower register that made her scales tingle. I just didn't want to presume. Their eyes met across the small space, and Liana felt a heat that had nothing to do with her species' naturally elevated body temperature. He said with a wry smile, My father was a general. He had my future mapped out from the day I was born. And you chose your own path instead. Liana finished, recognizing the parallel to her own life. I wanted to explore, to understand, not to conquer. Alex said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. My father called it weakness, I call it humanity. The intimacy of the moment wrapped around them like a cocoon. Liana found herself drawn to this human who, despite being from a species so different from her own, seemed to understand her in ways no one else ever had. We're quite the pair, she murmured. Two outcasts from warrior cultures finding each other across the stars. Maybe it's not coincidence, Alex suggested, his voice dropping lower. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor or a sense of rightness. Liana countered, her heart pounding as Alex shifted closer. Can I? He began, his gaze dropping to her lips. Yes, she whispered, not needing him to finish the question. The first touch of his lips against hers was gentle, questioning. Liana had never kissed a human before, had never kissed anyone outside her species, but something about it felt instinctively right. His lips were softer than the draconian's, warmer, and when his hand came up to cue her face, she leaned into the touch. The kiss deepened, and with it a hunger awakened in Liana that she hadn't known existed. Her scales flushed with heat as Alex's strong arms pulled her closer, eliminating the space between them. She could feel his heart racing against her chest, matching the rapid beat of her own. Is this okay? Alex whispered against her lips, ever respectful despite the desire evident in his eyes. "Morphine okay?" Liana assured him, her clawed fingers threading gently through his blonde hair. "Though I should warn you, draconian passion runs hot." Alex's answering smile was both tender and mischievous. "I'm not afraid of a little heat." What followed was a dance of discovery, two beings from different worlds learning each other's bodies with wonder and reverence. Liana marveled at the smoothness of Alex's skin, so different from her scales yet perfect in its own way. He in turn seemed fascinated by the patterns her scales formed, the way they shimmered in the moonlight. When she moved, their coming together was both tender and fierce, a perfect balance of strength and vulnerability in Alex's arms. Liana found acceptance she'd never known before, not as a fearsome draconianate, as a curiosity to be studied, but simply as herself as they laid together after, breathless and entwined. Liana rested her head on Alex's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns along her spine, sending pleasant shivers through her body. That was. She began, unable to find words adequate to describe the experience. Incredible. Alex finished for her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, careful of her ridges. "You're incredible," Liana smiled against his skin, feeling more at peace than she had in years. Whatever tomorrow might bring, this moment, this connection was real. And for no, that was enough. Liana woke to the gentle caress of Zartax's primary sun streaming through the panoramic window. For a moment she was disoriented. The unfamiliar ceiling, the softness of the bed beneath her, scales, the warm weight of an arm draped across her waist. Then the memories of that previous night flooded back, and she turned her head to find Alex still sleeping beside her in repose. His face looked younger, the lines of care smoothed away. His blonde hair was tousled, falling across his forehead in a way that made her fingers itch to brush it back. She studied him openly, marveling at how different they were physically. His smooth skin against her textured scales, his rounded features compared to her sharp angles, yet how perfectly they had fit together, as if sensing her gaze. Alex's eyes fluttered open, blue and clear. Even in the first moments of wakefulness, a slow smile spread across his face as he focused on her. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. "For a moment I thought I might have dreamed you. Is that a common occurrence?" Liana teased, her tail flicking playfully beneath the cover streaming of scaled women from across the stars. "Only the extraordinarily beautiful owns," Alex replied, leaning in to press a kiss to her forehead, careful of her ridges. The casual intimacy of their gesture made her heart flutter. "Flatterer," she accused, without heat, stretching languidly. The movement caused the sheet to slip, revealing more of her orange-cooled torso. Alex's eyes darkened appreciatively. "Not flattery. If it's true." His hand traced the pattern of scales along her shoulder, sending pleasant shivers down her spine. Liana marveled at how natural it felt to be here with him, how quickly the initial awkwardness had dissolved into something comfortable yet thrilling. "I should warn you," she said, propping herself up on one elbow, "that among draconians sharing a bed carries significant implications." Alex raised an eyebrow, his fingers continuing their exploration of her scales. "What kind of implications in our culture? Physical intimacy is not casual," Leon explained, watching his reaction carefully. "It signifies a formal courtship intention." To her relief, Alex didn't look alarmed. Instead, his expression grew thoughtful. "And how do you feel about that, Abutus?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Liana considered her answer carefully. By draconian standards, their connection had progressed with shocking speed, yet there was something undeniably right about it, as if the universe itself had engineered their meeting. "I feel," she said slowly, "that some connections transcend cultural norms, that sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the mind can catch up." Alex's smile was radiant. "I couldn't have said it better myself." He pulled her closer, and for a while conversation gave way to more primal forms of communication. Later, as they shared a simple breakfast of synthesized protein and native Zaraxian fruit, they discussed practical matters. Liana needed to retrieve essential items from her crash pod and attempt to establish communication with her diplomatic mission. We should also check if your pod's distress beacon is functioning. Alex suggested, pouring her a cup of a steaming earth beverage he called coffee. If not, we can boost the signal through me communications array. You seem remarkably well equipped for someone taking a break from complications. Lion observed, accepting the cup and inhaling the rich aroma. A flicker of something discomp guilt crossed Alex's face before his easy smile returned. Let's just say, I like to be prepared. Before she could press further, he continued. We'll need to go through the settlemento. Reach your pod. Are you ready to face the locals again? Liana squared hers. Holders, I faced worse than provincial prejudice. That's my warrior princess, Alex said with a wink, then looked momentarily embarrassed. Sorry, that was presumptuous. I like it, Lion admitted, feeling her scales flush warm. Though technically I'm more of a diplomat than a warrior. A diplomatic warrior princess, then, Alex amended, leaning across the small table to kiss her. The coffee was forgotten as the kiss deepened, and it was some time before they finally prepared to leave the pod outside Xerax's. Dual suns had risen, fully bathing the settlement in golden light. The air was crisp and carried the faint metallic tang Liana had noticed upon her arrival. As they walked toward the main street, she was acutely aware of Alex beside her, not just his physical presence, but the way he deliberately matched his stride to hers. That protective angle of his body, the occasional brush of his hand against hers. The settlement looked different in daylight. Less intimidating, more mundane prefabricated structures lined the dusty street, interspersed with more permanent buildings constructed from local materials. Residents moved about their business, many stopping to stare as Liana and Alex passed. Ignore them, Alex murmured, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that was both reassuring and possessive. They had almost reached the settlement's edge when a burly figure stepped into their path, the four-armed quarry and bartender from the previous night. Well, well, he sneered, his upper set of arms crossed over his chest, while the lower rested menacingly on his hips. The lizard found herself a pet human. Liana felt Alex tense beside her, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. We're just passing through, she said evenly. We have no quarrel with you. Maybe I have a quarrel with you, the Corurian retorted. Your kind think you're so superior with your fancy empire and your warrior codes, but out here you're a nothing. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Liana sensed their hostility, the air thick with it. Step aside, Alex said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. The lady is a diplomatic representative of the Draconian Empire. Interfering with her could cause interstellar incidents you're not equipped to handle. The Corin laughed, a harsh sound. Diplomatic representative? Is that what she told you? What kind of diplomat crashes in an unmarked escape pod? Liana felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. How did he know her pod was unmarked? She hadn't mentioned that detail to anyone except Alex. Move, Alex repeated, and something in his tone made the crowd shift uneasily for a tense moment. It seemed the Corian might escalate the confrontation. Then with a contemptuous snort he stepped aside. Your human won't always be around to protect you, Lizardi called after them as they passed once they were beyond the settlement's edge. Liana released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was interesting, too interesting, Alex. A greedish expression, grim. He knew about your pod. Someone's been talking or watching. Liana nodded, a new weariness settling over her. We should hurry. As they set off toward the crash site, she couldn't shake the feeling that their morning idyll had been just that, a brief respite before the complications of reality intruded. Yet with Alex walking steadfastly beside her, she found she wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The crash site looked worse in daylight. Liana's pod had carved a deep furrow through the purple vegetation, leaving a trail of twisted metal and scorched earth. The pot itself lay at an angle, partial ironed in the soil, its hull breached in several places. "Someone's been here," Alex said immediately. Crouching to examine fresh footprints around the wreckage, multiple means Liana felt a chill run down her spine. Scaveners too methodical for scavengers. Alex pointed to the pod's exterior. "Look at the access panel, it's been removed. Cleanly not ripped off, and these tool marks are precise as they approach the pod." The extent of the tampering became clear. The communication array had been systematically dismantled, key components removed with surgical precision. The navigation system was similarly gutted, and the emergency beacon had been disabled. This wasn't opportunistic, letting Alex concluded, his expression grim. This was professional sabate. Liana's mind raced. Who would target a diplomatic evacuation pod? And the Draconian Empire had enemies certainly, but few with operatives on a backwater planet like Zartax. "I need to check something," she said, climbing carefully into the damaged pod. Her personal storage compartment was located beneath the pilot seat, secured with her biometric signature. To her relief, it remained sealed. Whoever had tampered with the pod either hadn't found it or couldn't access it. She pressed her palm against the scanner, and the compartment slid open with a soft hiss. Inside were her diplomatic credentials, a secure communication device, and a small data crystal, standard issue for all Draconian diplomats, containing emergency protocols and secure contacts. As she retrieved the items, her fingers brushed against something unexpected, a small metallic disc tucked into a hidden pocket of the compartment. She didn't remember placing it there. Curious, she activated it. A holographic message flickered to life, displaying the stern face of Commander Thorne, her superior on the diplomatic mission. "Diplomat Liana." The recording began, the commander's voice low and urgent. "If you're viewing this, then my suspicions were correct, and the mission has been compromised. Your evacuation was not an accident, but a deliberate measure to ensure your safety. Trust no one. The treaty negotiations have attracted unwanted attention from factions who would prefer a war to peace. Your pod's navigation was programmed to bring you to Zarax, neutral territory where you should be beyond their reach. Stay hidden until I can arrange secure extraction." This message will self-D. After viewing true to his word, the hologram flickered and disappeared, the disk growing warm in her palm as its internal mechanisms erased all data. Liana sat frozen, her mind whirling with implications. The diplomatic mission, a historic peace treaty between the Draconian Empire and the Terrellian Confederation, after decades of Cold War, had been sabotaged, and she had been deliberately sent away, presumably because she knew something or had seen something that made her a target. But what she had been a relatively minor member of the delegation responsible for cultural protocols rather than substantive negotiations. "Liana," Alex's voice called from outside the pod. "Everything okay in there?" She hesitated. Their commander had said to trust no one, that Alex had taken her in, protected her, at his bed with her. Surely he wasn't involved in this conspiracy. Yet his presence on this remote planet was convenient too. Convenient perhaps. "Coming," she called back, tucking the secure communicator and credentials into her pocket. She needed time to think, to process this revelation. When she emerged from the pod, Alex was examining the surrounding area. His back to her, feminine sunlight glinted off his blonde hair, and for a moment Liana was struck by how alien he was, how alien and how dear he had become to her in such a short time. "Find what you needed?" he asked, turning to face her. "Yes," she replied, studying his expression for any sign of deception. "My credentials and some personal items." Alex nodded, then pointed to a section of the pod's hull. "Look at this. The damage pattern suggests Thepid was hit by something before it crashed, possibly an energy weapon." Liana moved closer to examine the scorched metal. He was right. The pattern was consistent with a glancing hit from a directed energy weapon, not the random damage of atmospheric entry. "Someone shot at you," Alex said, his voice hardening. "This wasn't just an evacuation gone wrong. Someone wanted to make sure you didn't reach your destination." The confirmation of what Commander Thorne's message had implied sent a shiver through Lyanna. "We should go," she said, suddenly feeling exposed in the open crash site as they turned to leave. Alex caught her arm gently. "Lyanna, where aren't you telling me you found something in there, didn't you?" His blue eyes were intense, searching. Lyanna felt torn between the commander's warning and a growing feelings for this human, who had shown her nothing but kindness and acceptance. She began and stopped. A movement in the nearby vegetation caught her eye. "We're being watched." Alex followed her gaze, his body tensing back to the settlement. He murmured quickly, "But don't run, we don't want to provoke whoever it is." They set off at a brisk walk, Alex positioning himself slightly behind Lyanna, protecting her back. The gesture touched her even as doubt nodded at her mind. "Alex," she said quietly as they walked, "why are you really on Zar attacks?" The truth this time, she felt, rather than saw him stiffen. "It's complicated, uncomplicated," she insisted. "Bows. Right now I'm wondering if your appearance in my life was as convenient as my pod crashing near your settlement." Alex was silent for several long moments. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "I'm not who you think I am, Lyanna, but I swear to you, I'm not your enemy." Before she could respond, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. Alex shoved her roughly to the ground as an energy bolt sizzled through the space where they had been standing. "Run!" he shouted, pulling her to her feet as they sprinted toward the settlement, energy bolts striking the ground around them. Lyanna's mind raced with questions. Who was Alex? Really, was he involved in the plot against the peace treaty? And if not, why was he on this remote planet at the exact moment she needed him? Most troubling of all, why did her heart still trust him when her mind was screaming at her to be cautious? Energy bolts sizzled through the air as Alex pulled Lyanna behind a cluster of rock formations at the edge of the settlement. Their pursuers, shadowy figures in nondescript combat gear, were closing in, methodically sweeping the area. "This way," Alex hissed, guiding her through a narrow gap between the rocks. "I have a contingency plan." "Of course you do," Lyanna muttered, her scales flushed with exertion and anger. "Care to explain who you really are while we're running for our lives?" Alex led her down a hidden path that wound behind the settlement, away from the main thoroughfare. "I'm an intelligence operative for the Terran Alliance," admitted, his voice low. "I was sent to Xarax to monitor suspected anti-peace activities in this sector." Lyanna nearly stumbled. "You're a spy intelligence operative sounds better," he replied with a ghost of his usual smile. "But yes, there have been reports of saboteurs working to undermine the treaty negotiations between your people and the Perts. Trellians. My mission was observation only until you literally crashed into my life." They ducked into a narrow ravine, the sounds of pursuit momentarily fading. Lyanna studied Alex's face, searching for deception, but finding only earnest concern. "So, last night," she began, a new hurt blossoming in her chest, "was never part of any mission?" Alex finished, firmly taking her scaled hands in his. "Lyanna, I didn't expect to find you here. I certainly didn't expect to." He trailed off, his eyes intense. "What happened between us was real, at least for me." The sincerity in his voice made her want to believe him, but doubt still gnawed at her. Convenient that a human intelligence secret was stationed on the exact planet where a draconian diplomat's escape pod happened to crash. "Not convenient, deliberate," Alex corrected. "Your commander and my superiors have been working together behind the scenes. Peace treaty is more important to both our species than most people realize." A distant shout reminded them of their pursuers. Alex tensed, listening. "We need to move. My extraction vessel issued in about 2 kilometers from here." "You have a ship?" Lyanna asked incredulously. "Did y'all think I was planning to live in that tiny pod forever?" Alex grinned, some of his usual charm returning. "It's small, but it's FTL capable and has advanced stealth systems. We can use it to reach the diplomatic summit and warn both delegations about the conspiracy." They set off at a brisk pace, keeping to cover whenever possible as they traveled. Alex explained more about his mission and the intelligence he gathered, The saboteurs are being funded by weapons manufacturers from both our civilizations, he said grimly. They stand to lose billions if the Cold War ends. They've infiltrated both governments at high levels. That explains why Commander Thorne sent me away. Liana realized I must have seen something or someone that I wasn't supposed to. Probably without even realizing it, Alex agreed. Your commander suspected a leak in the Draconian delegation. Sending you away was meant to protect you. They crested a small hilland. Alex pointed to a dense thicket of purple leaf trees ahead. The ship is hidden there, stealth netting and Terran-matching camouflage. As they approached the thicket, Liana felt a strange mix of emotions: relief at the prospect of escape, weird with lingering doubt about Alex's true intentions, and beneath it all was a deeper feeling. She was reluctant to name a connection to this human that had grown from attraction to something far more profound in an impossibly short time. Here, Alex said, stopping at what appeared to be a solid wall of vegetation. He pressed his palm against a seemingly random tree trunk, and a section of the thicket shimmered and disappeared, revealing a sleek spacecraft about twice the size of her escape pod. Impressive, Liana admitted as Alex quickly entered a series of Coesto. Lower the boarding ramp. Wait until you see the inside, he replied with a wink that made her scales flush. Despoteth circumstances. The interior was compact but efficiently designed, with a cockpit large enough for two, a small living area, and what appeared to be a single sleeping compartment. More shared sleeping arrangements, Liana noted with a mixture of embarrassment and anticipation. Alex moved immediately to the control panel, his fingers dancing across the interface. I need to run pre-flight checks. Will be detected the moment we break atmosphere. So everything needs to be perfect. Liana watched him work, struck by the competence and focus he displayed, so different from the casual charm he'd shown in the settlement, yet somehow clearly attractive. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. How long until we can launch? She asked, moving to stand beside him. 20 minutes for full systems check, he replied, not looking up from the controls. 10 if we're a ship, but I'd rather not. A warning light suddenly flashed on the console. Alex swore under his breath. They found us. Perimeter sensors are picking up multiple hostiles approaching from the settlement direction. Liana's hand moved instinctively to the small blaster she'd retrieved from her pod. How many? At least 6. Alex said grimly, pulling a more substantial weapon from beneath the pilot's seat. We need to hold them off while the ship completes its startup sequence. Their eyes met, and in that moment all doubts and questions seemed to fall away. Whatever complications lay between them, cultural differences, professional obligations, secrets revealed and still hidden right now, they were simply two beings fighting together for survival. I'll take the port side, said her draconian military training garsetting itself. You cover starboard. Alex nodded, a smile of admiration crossing his face. I knew there was a reason I fell for you. The casual admission sent a jolt through Liana's body, more powerful than any energy bolt. Before she could respond, Alex leaned forward and kissed her, quick but fierce, full of promise and possibility for luck. Murmured against her lips, a human tradition. I like your traditions, Liana replied, a voice husky. When this is over, I'd like to learn more of them. Alex's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper. It's a date. They moved to defensive positions as the ship's engines began their warm-up sequence, the low hum filling the cabin. Through the viewport, Liana could see shadowy figures moving through the trees, converging on their position in that moment. Despite the danger, she felt an unexpected clarity. Whatever happened next, whatever revelations still awaited them, one thing was certain: her life had irrevocably changed the moment she'd crashed on this planet and met this remarkable human who saw beauty where others saw only fear. The first Attica broke through the tree line just as the ship's engines reached 60% power. Liana fired a warning shot, forcing them back into cover. 10 more minutes until we can launch, Alex called from his position. We need to hold them off. A barrage of energy bolts struck the ship's exterior, the shields absorbing most of the impact, but not yet at full strength. Alex returned fire, his shots precise and controlled. They're trying to flank us, Liana warned, spotting movement to their left before either of them could react. A new volley of energy fire erupted from the trees, but this time targeting their attackers. A familiar four-armed figure burst from the underbrush wielding dual blasters. With deadly accuracy, Febertender. Liana gasped in disbelief. The Koran moved with surprising agility, taking down two attackers before diving behind the ship's landing gear for cover. "Took you long enough, Maddox?" growled at Alex. "I've been maintaining my cover for 3 miserable years on this backwater planet waiting for extraction." Alex grinned. "Good to see you too, Krell. Your acting was superb. He almost believed you actually hated Draconians. Who says?" "I don't," Krell retorted, but there was no real venom in his voice as he nodded respectfully to Liana. "No offense, diplomat professionalists. You're with the Terran Alliance?" Liana asked, struggling to reconcile this new development. "Coalition for Interspecies Peace." Krell corrected, firing another precise shot at an attacker attempting to circle behind them. "We recruit from all species who believe in a stable galaxy: humans, Draconians, Quarrens, even a few Terrellians, though the route's harder to convince." Their ship's engines surged to 80%, almost there. Alex announced. "Krell, you coming with US, and miss the chance to get off this rock. Try to leave without me, and I'll shoot you myself," the Quarian replied, covering their retreat as they backed up the boarding ramp. Once inside, Alex sealed the hatch and returned tub controls, while Krell and Liana maintained fire through the viewports. The attackers, realizing their quarry was about to escape, intensified their assault shields at 90%. Alex reported engines at full power. Hang on the ship lifted off with a roar, the remaining Neji bolts dissipating harmlessly against his now active shields as they ascended through. Zarax's atmospherical holstered his weapons and slumped into a seat. "I have something you'll want," he said, pulling a data crystal from a hidden pocket in his vest. Complete roster of the conspiracy names, financial transactions, communication logs. Been gathering it piece by piece for years. Alex's eyes widened. "That's why Central kept you in place so long. This is the evidence we need. Both your superiors have been waiting for this." Krell confirmed, nodding to both Alex and Liana. "Commander Thorne and Director Harding have been coordinating the investigation from both sides. They feared the worst when you went silent." Diplomat Liana felt a wave of relief. Her commander hadn't betrayed her. He'd been protecting her all along as the ship broke orbit and engaged its FTL drive. The immediate danger faded. Krell excused himself to the small cargo hold, claiming he needed to decontaminate after 3 years in that cesspit of a settlement, leaving Alex and Liana alone in the cockpit. Liana said, settling into the co-pilot seat, "It seems we were both pawns in a much larger game." "Not pawns," Alex corrected, reaching over to take her hand. "Important pieces, maybe, but with our own moves to make." His touch sent that now familiar warmth through her scales. Despite everything they'd been through, the danger, the revelations, the narrow escape, the connection between them remained undiminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. "What happens when we reach the diplomatic summit?" she asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind finally surfacing. "You return to your intelligence work, I to my diplomatic post." Alex's expression grew serious. "That depends on what you want, Liana. I know what I want, and what's that?" she asked, her heart reaching. "You," he said simply, "however that needs to work. I've spent my career moving between worlds, never belonging anywhere, but with you for the first time. I feel like I found where I belong." Liana's breath caught in her throat. Among Draconians, such a direct declaration would constitute a formal courtship proposal. Did he realize the significance of his words? "Alex, in my culture, what you're suggesting, I know," he interrupted gently. Krell briefed me on Draconian customs bore. I was deployed. I know what I'm asking. The realization that Hoy understood that his words were chosen deliberately, with full knowledge of their meaning in her culture, left her momentarily speechless. "I'm not saying it will be easy." Alex continued, his thumb tracing patterns on her scaled palm. "We come from different worlds, literally. But if this mission has taught me anything, it's that the difference between species can be bridges rather than barriers. Through the viewport, these swirling colors of FTL space created a backdrop that seemed fitting for this moment. A universe of possibility astrink. Before them, my father will be horrified, Liana said with a small laugh. A draconian warrior's daughter choosing a human mate. I can handle disapproving parents, Alex replied with a grin. It's a human specialty. Their laughter mingled in the small cockpit, a sound of shared joy that transcended species. When it faded, Liana found herself moving from her seat to his drawn by a gravity more powerful than any planet's pull. As she settled onto his lap, his arms encircled her waist with a reverent gentleness that blighted his strength. Are you sure about this? She whispered, her rage forehead touching his smooth one. The stares, the whispers, the challenges we'll face. I've never been more certain of anything, Alex replied, his blue eyes holding hers. And besides, I have it on good authority that humans are remarkably stubborn when they want something. So I've noticed, Liana murmured before claiming his lips with hers. Their journey to the diplomatic summit took 3 days, of shared meals and shared stories of learning each other's bodies and hearts in the privacy of the small sleeping compartment. Krell tactfully gave them space, spending most of his time in the cargo hold reviewing his intelligence reps. When they finally arrived, they were greeted not as fugitives or failures, but as heroes. Commander Thorne and Director Harding had indeed been working together, and with Krell's evidence the conspiracy was quickly unraveled. The peace treaty negotiations resumed with renewed commitment from both sides. 6 months later, as the historic treaty was signed, Liana stood proudly in her formal, draconian diplomatic attire, watching as her people and the Terrellians officially ended decades of Cold War beside her, resplendent in a Terran Alliance dress uniform. Alex squeezed her hand. Not bad for a crushed escape pod and a shared bed, he whispered in her ear. Liana smiled, remembering how terrified she'd been that first night, convinced her appearance would frighten him, that sharing a bed would be the height of awkwardness. How wrong she had been. Who would have thought, she whispered, back, that what began with fear would end with love later that night, in their new quarters, spacious and elegant, yet somehow less intimate than Alex's tiny pod had been. They celebrated in their own private way. As they lay together afterward, Liana traced the contours of Alex's face in the starlight streaming through their window. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly, taking in a scary orange-scaled alien who crashed on your planet. Alex laughed, pulling her closer. Best decision I ever made, though I should confess something. What's that? Lena asked, raising a scaled brow. I never thought you were scary, he admitted, kissing the ridge above her eye. From the moment I saw you in that tavern, all I could think was how beautiful you were. Liar, she teased, but her heart swelled with happiness. Intelligence operative, he corrected with a grin. We're trained to recognize beauty in unexpected places. As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Liana reflected on the strange path that had brought them together. A crashed pod, a hostile settlement, a conspiracy that spanned galaxies, yet somehow against all odds she had found not just safety, but love in the arms of a human who saw beyond her fearsome appearance to the person beneath. She had thought her appearance would scare him. Sharing a bed had been the last thing she expected. But sometimes she realized the universe had a way of giving you exactly what you